coming to terms with the simple fact that each one of us is a healer. And you don't need to be a psychiatrist. You don't need to be a trained therapist. And the key ingredients of healing you already have in your possession. That ability to use expressed empathy, active listening, nonverbal communication, the skills to reflect and show that you are rooted in the present moment. We all have that, but we haven't been practicing it for such a long time, that we feel we are not capable of doing it. So that's the other challenge that most people struggle with. And so we spend a lot of time, trying to instill that sense of confidence in a person's ability to use expressed empathy, active listening, nonverbal communication, and using silence as a tool for communication and creating connections.
Welcome to Therapist Uncensored. Building on decades of professional experience, this podcast tackles neurobiology, modern attachment, and more in an honest way that's helpful in healing humans. Your session begins now with Dr. Ann Kelly and Sue Marriott.
When someone close to me got out of the hospital this past spring, she had all these specialists lined up, cardiologists, endocrinologists, you name it. But literally, she had no one to coordinate her care. So we're sitting there looking at the list of follow-up appointments. And when I asked her about a PCP, she said she has kept meaning to find one, but she keeps running to these roadblocks. Either they don't take her insurance, weren't taking new patients. It was stressful because she really needed someone to coordinate her care. So we literally pulled out my phone right there in her living room and got on ZocDoc. Within 10 minutes, we found her a primary care doctor who takes her insurance, had great reviews, and could see her that same week. It was amazing. ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare high-quality, in-network doctors and click to instantly book an appointment. You have access to over 100,000 doctors, anywhere from mental health to psychiatry. So you can find a psychiatrist with openings, to dentist, urgent care, every specialty. And in fact, once we booked her PCP, I realized how much I've been putting off going to see a dermatologist. So I jumped on and did that as well. So stop putting off those doctor's appointments. Go to ZocDoc.com/TU to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/TU. ZocDoc.com/TU.
Hey, everybody. This is a don't miss episode for a couple of reasons. First, you've got to meet Dr. Dixon Chibanda. He's a powerful healer and a brilliant scholar, but sitting with him, you'll feel his soul warmth. I can practically guarantee you'll be inspired by our conversation. You may be moved to action and likely experience a few warm light bulb moments. Dr. Chibanda is considered a leader in the global conversation to democratize mental health care. He's the founder of the Friendship Bench, a program that mobilizes the healing wisdom of community elders, specifically grandmothers, and effectively expands access to culturally grounded mental health care worldwide. Over 100 peer-reviewed studies have validated its effectiveness. And the program has expanded across multiple countries, reaching hundreds of thousands of people who would otherwise not have access to such care. He goes over the principles and generously offers free training to anyone over 65 years of life. And there are multiple offerings, actually, that you'll hear about in the episode. If the Friendship Bench is familiar, that is because about 5 years ago, or a little over 5 years ago, I discovered the program and interviewed the lead psychologist at the time. So some of you may be familiar with this, but this is the actual founder of the program. Dr. Chibanda is a practicing psychiatrist at the University of Zimbabwe and the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, where he explores the intersection of indigenous knowledge and Western models of care to bring healing to more people everywhere. He's also an accomplished author and compelling public speaker. His new book, The Friendship Bench: How 14 Grandmothers Inspired a Mental Health Revolution, is so powerful that I want to gather us together in community to absorb the book. And we'll be offering a free reading group so that we can process it and take it in, take the message and the storytelling in all together. To find out about that, just go to our website, therapistsuncensored.com, and the events page, or drop us a line at support@therapistsuncensored.com so you can see that I'm pretty excited about this message. All right, let's get right to it. Hey, everybody, welcome to Therapists Uncensored, and a very special welcome to Dr. Dixon Chibanda. Dr. Chibanda, can we start by you just describing yourself for our audience?
Thanks for having me. So I am a psychiatrist by training, but I like to see myself as a person who is immersed in community through storytelling, something that I have learned from the grandmothers that I work with at the friendship bench. So while professionally I am a psychiatrist, I have over the last decade realized the power of storytelling and how it can drive healing in communities across the globe.
The lineage of our teachers is very monolithic. It's a narrow river. And many of us as therapists don't realize how limited that this Western traditional view is. So we have really been interested in trying to infuse therapists across the world that listen to this with indigenous knowledge, with community-based knowledge. So it is such an honor to have you. And I wondered if we could sort of start there about talking about the differences between this kind of community-based interventions and traditional mental health.
Great. That's a great starting point. And with that, I would start with a very common Zimbabwean and African proverb, which says, I'll first say it in my local language, which is kukura kurerwa, which literally means personal growth and wisdom are nurtured by community elders. And the work that I have been doing with the Friendship Bench is a great example of how community elders have taken charge of healing in communities and creating that much needed connection that leads to healing. The work that I have been doing for over a decade has made me realize that opening minds and hearts to healing is possible when ordinary people learn to support one another in extraordinary ways. That, in essence, is what the Friendship Bench is all about.
Which is so different than requiring letters behind your name, the exorbitant costs mental health care delivery I think it's a $95 billion industry. So this is a real disruptor to that, which is wonderful. How did you come to be interested in this? And what's the creation story?
So the whole Friendship Bench story actually, sadly, emerges out of a tragic event. During my formative years working as a psychiatrist, I lost a patient of mine to suicide. Erica was her name. Erica had been under my care for just over 2 years when she took her own life by suicide. And I still vividly recall Erica's mother calling me to tell me that Erica had hung herself from a mango tree in the family garden. I was devastated. But I think what really hit me hard about Erica's death was when Erica's mother told me that they knew, Erica's mom and Erica's dad knew that Erica needed to come back to the hospital because she'd had a relapse. And Erica herself also wanted to come back to the hospital. But the reason why they couldn't come to the hospital was because they didn't have the bus fare to get onto a bus to come to the hospital where I worked. And that story kind of made me realize that I needed to find a way of taking evidence-based mental health care out of institutions and into the community and get it delivered by ordinary people. And that's really the starting point of my journey with Friendship Bench.
It's impossible to be able to meet the need, which is true here too, but particularly that there's not, the proportion of psychiatrists or psychologists or mental health worker to population is painfully low. So this is an excellent solution.
It's actually getting worse. If you just look at the global population of people struggling with depression, suicide, for instance, amongst young people aged between 15 and 24 is a leading cause of death globally. And loneliness is now a global epidemic. So it's not getting better. So we really need these alternative solutions to narrow that care gap. And whether you're looking at the developed West or countries in the South, we just will never have enough psychiatrists. We will never have enough clinical psychologists or trained therapists. So I think this is an alternative way of narrowing that care gap.
We don't value the elders as much, I think, culturally.
Definitely. One of the things that I have learned from doing this work and immersing myself in the lives of our community elders is really one simple lesson that, community elders are the custodians of the local wisdom and knowledge. And they are also, people who carry, the battle scars of life, and often with grace and dignity. And all of us can benefit from having a strong relationship with people like that. I like to see the elder generation as, an anchor for one's moral campus, if you like, for lack of a better word. And, interestingly, I also see during my travels across the world that the appreciation of those who have lived long years is actually cross-cultural. I've seen that in my work in New Orleans. I've seen that in Washington, D.C. as well. And, more recently in London, where we are training Friendship Bench, and prior to that in El Salvador. So I think there's also this misconception, this belief that elder or older folks are only important in the global South. They are increasingly beginning to be important across the globe. And I think we need to find ways of tapping into this vast resource. Just looking at the United Nations projections about the population of folks aged 65 and above, in the next 5 years, there'll be close to 1 billion. And imagine that is a resource that we need to really tap into to address a lot of the challenges that we are facing, around loneliness, teenage mental health issues. I think they can really play a role as the first port of call in communities across the world.
And I imagine that the benefit goes both ways. Have you found that?
Yes, the benefit definitely goes both ways. One of the values at Friendship Bench is research, and our core values at Friendship Bench are empathy, connectedness, and research. But just zeroing in on the value of research, we have over 100 peer-reviewed scientific publications, and some of our research specifically focuses on the grandmothers or the elders who are doing this work. And we have found that the grandmothers who do Friendship Bench work have lower rates of, common mental disorders, depression, anxiety, loneliness, and also, non-communicable diseases such as hypertension and diabetes. They have much lower rates when compared to grandmothers with similar socio-demographic characteristics who are not doing Friendship Bench work. And as we go deeper to sort of analyze why that is happening, our qualitative studies show that the grandmothers who are doing this work have a greater sense of belonging and purpose. And that really gives them an improved quality of life, if you like, for lack of a better word.
For folks that are unfamiliar with the model, can you walk us through how it started and then how it's implemented now? But starting with a single bench, what happens? What's the flow that happens?
So the friendship bench, just as a brief description to start with, is really a brief psychological therapy delivered by trained community grandmas who are trained in the basics of what we call cognitive behavioral therapy, with an emphasis on behavior activation, activity scheduling, and problem solving. So they receive a 4-week training. And after they are trained, each grandma is allocated a wooden park bench in their community. We then facilitate referrals to that bench using social media, using existing organizations in the communities, and using the police, schools, primary healthcare facilities, so lots of different sources of referral to the bench. So that one of the things that we train the grandmothers in is also the use of screening tools, and they also utilize an algorithm to establish the severity of symptoms. Because as much as we want the grandmas to be able to reach out and help everybody, we also appreciate that they are not trained therapists, and they will need support in some of the cases. And that's why we use screening tools. After screening, they then carry out this therapy on the bench, anything between 4 to 6 sessions. After the therapy, folks are invited to join a support group in their community, and the cycle continues. So I started off with just 14 grandmothers, and my book, The Friendship Bench, how 14 grandmothers inspired a mental health movement, is really about the first 14 grandmothers and the beginning of Friendship Bench, and how it subsequently has gone on to be replicated in a number of countries.
You mentioned a few of the countries and the states that it's in. How does that look translated? So, for example, you mentioned Louisiana, New Orleans.
Yeah, so we currently use what we call the Friendship Bench in a box, which is literally our DIY scale strategy. And so what we've done is we have brought together the evidence and knowledge that we have acquired over the last 10, 15 years, and really condensed it in a very simple, user-friendly way in what we call the Friendship Bench in a box. So anyone wanting to do Friendship Bench, wherever they are in the world, we get to onboard them to use the Friendship Bench in a box. And our team provides the technical skills that they might need to be able to do it. For instance, in Washington, D.C., in New Orleans, we have done that both face-to-face and virtual through hybrid sessions, online. So it's very, very flexible. And so we run on average a 4-week training program. And in that training program, we equip folks on how to use the different levels of Friendship Bench. We've got level 1, level 2, and level 3. I'll just touch on level 1 briefly. So level 1 is really about how to create space for people to share their stories. Because at the very heart of what we do at Friendship Bench, it's really creating that space to make people feel comfortable, to feel vulnerable. Because when people begin to share their stories, that's when healing begins. And so that level 1 focuses on issues around empathy, how to use empathy as a tool. What is expressed empathy? The whole idea around making people feel respected and understood, and how, when we're able to do that, we actually create a space for people to start telling their stories. It also focuses on the use of nonverbal communication. How do we manage silence when we engage with people? Because silence is actually a tool that can be used. A lot of people feel uncomfortable when there's silence, but at Friendship Bench, we train people how to use silence. We train people how to use that nonverbal communication. how to use your eyes, you use your hands, and the power of active listening as well. I could go on and on about this, but this is in essence the level one, which is really the critical foundation of Friendship Bench. And all of this is actually derived from observing the grandmothers over the years. Right now we have over 3,000 grandmothers doing this work in Zimbabwe, but we also have many different people across the world doing this work in different replications.
And I've noticed that you have said grandmothers. Is this elders in general, grandfathers, just elderly, is it specifically grandmothers, or is that kind of a
Well,
way of talking about it?
anyone can do Friendship Bench, but the grandmothers are the gold standard. And I'll tell you why. The reason why the grandmas are the gold standard is because when you work with grandmas, they are a lot more reliable. They are rooted in their communities. They are a source of wisdom and knowledge. And it's cost effective to work with grandmas because once they get involved in this work, they usually don't leave. And once they start doing this work and they get it, they don't need that much supervision. So we have Friendship Bench, which is run by young people as well. But with the young people, we've just actually recently completed a clinical trial where we were comparing young people versus grandmas. One of the challenges with using young people is that they require a lot more support, a lot more supervision, and they are more likely to break the rules around confidentiality than the grandmas. So you can use the model with anyone. And when we went to New York City, for instance, when we first brought Friendship Bench to New York City, it was delivered by folks from the LGBTQ plus community. In Vietnam, it was delivered by people living with HIV who are on methadone replacement therapy. So the delivering agent can really be anybody. But, we always zero in on the grandmas for Friendship Bench Zimbabwe because it's a lot more cost effective for us.
Wow. When you were just describing level one, I was just imagining this is good training for anyone, anywhere about just socio-emotional, I wish we could get this in the public schools,
Yeah. And you're quite right. It's so, and one of the things that we've done recently, because we've also realized that Friendship Bench, that there's so many people they're interested, particularly in that level one training. And so we are now actually offering level one training for free. Anyone aged 65 and above who wants to be trained in the level one on how to reach out to people, they can go on our website and just register for a free training. We are offering a level one training, but I must say the first 3 trainings are already fully booked. But they can actually join any of the other subsequent trainings. You're quite right about that. Yeah.
That is so exciting because I get what you're saying about the grounding within the community and the battle scars. It just makes so much sense. What has surprised you in this last period of time? And, with the rigorous research, what are some of the surprising findings?
At a very personal level, one of the most surprising findings has been the simple fact that wherever you go in the world, there's a lot more that connects us as human beings than we think. And sometimes our obsession with social media and the news in general makes us believe that actually we're different when actually we're not. And so this work, this Friendship Bench work, whether I'm in New Orleans, in Washington, D.C., or we're in Ohio, or in London, or Vietnam, right now I'm in Germany, actually, in a place called Freidenthal, which is out in rural Germany where we're training Friendship Bench. You kind of just realize the power that we have as human beings in terms of the similarities and the things that we all want are the same. So that has been, I guess, one of the most humbling lessons for me. We're actually very similar across the globe.
It's such an important message, especially now in the political environment that we're in, that encourages such divisiveness. I just could feel myself softening as you were talking about like this relief of just this conversation about the similarity. And this seems like just the practicality and the ease of here's something that we know works, empirically works, and is accessible. And it's like, why would a community not want this? You know what I mean? It's good for everybody. What difficulties have you seen in the implementation, and what obstacles typically are there?
Some of the most common challenges that folks tend to face is around the data collection around this work. As I said earlier on, the values of Friendship Bench are empathy, connectedness, and research. And the reason why we focus on the research is folks out there want to know that something works. And to show that something works, you've got to have some kind of data, some kind of empirical way of establishing that it works. And that is something that we always emphasize. But of course, you can still do Friendship Bench without collecting the data, especially if you're doing it for personal reasons, if it's something you want to do for a small group of people in your own sort of community. So the data aspect has been one of the challenges that a lot of people who are trying to do Friendship Bench on a large scale tend to struggle with. The other thing that I think people struggle with as well is coming to terms with the simple fact that each one of us is a healer. And you don't need to be a psychiatrist. You don't need to be a trained therapist. And the key ingredients of healing you already have in your possession. That ability to use expressed empathy, active listening, nonverbal communication, the skills to reflect and show that you are rooted in the present moment. We all have that, but we haven't been practicing it for such a long time, that we feel we are not capable of doing it. So that's the other challenge that most people struggle with. And so we spend a lot of time, trying to instill that sense of confidence in a person's ability to use expressed empathy, active listening, nonverbal communication, and using silence as a tool for communication and creating connections.
Yeah, just the training itself feels therapeutic, it seems to me. And even like teaching people to unlearn some of the things that they may have learned, like that they need to fix the problem.
Yeah. Half the time it's not about fixing the problem. Half the time it's about making a person realize that you're there for them. You've heard their story. It just giving them that space to share their story. One of the things that we always say at Friendship Bench is that healing begins when a person is comfortable enough to share their story.
And can you say more? You've said that a couple of times, the sharing the story and stories as healing. Can you say a little bit more about that? It's very intriguing.
So the starting point, again, this was something I learned from the first 14 grandmothers that I worked with. So being a psychiatrist, when I started Friendship Bench, my idea at first, when I started Friendship Bench, my idea was it should be called, the mental health bench. And of course, the 14 grandmothers were like, no, you can't call it the mental health bench, and I was adamant that it had to be called the mental health bench. And, interestingly, nobody wanted to sit on the mental health bench, and so, and so after a while, the grandmas were like, you see, we told you, so why don't you change the name? And so we changed the name. And all of a sudden, everybody wanted to sit on the mental health bench. So I don't know why I'm telling this story, but,
That's a lovely story. I love it.
no, but your question, what was your question?
I don't even remember, but I like the story better. Well, it's an example of learning from the community. You had an idea that came from, the system. And then as you opened up and heard and were impacted by the knowledge, the indigenous knowledge, that there was knowledge there that, we had to open up to, and that they were right.
Yes. So that was my first big lesson, actually. And then the second big lesson was, being a psychiatrist, I thought, well, what we actually need to do here is, first of all, teach the grandmas how to identify symptoms. And once they've identified the symptoms, they make a diagnosis. Once they make a diagnosis, they then move on to the therapy or a particular kind of treatment, which is the way we function anyway as psychiatrists. And the grandmas, they were like, no, we're not going to do that. What we're going to do is lean into the story, because human beings connect through stories. And now I remember your question was around stories. That's why I started off with the mental health thing, I think. So they were like, human beings connect through stories. What we're going to focus on at the friendship bench is making it possible, making it comfortable for anyone who sits on the bench to share their story, because healing begins when people start sharing their stories. And of course, at first, I really didn't understand what these grandmas were about, like, well, what's this whole healing and stories and all that? But I began to get it, after a while, when I saw how these grandmas were able to intuitively make people feel comfortable, regardless of the challenges that they were bringing to the bench, and people came with all sorts of challenges, suicidal ideation, intimate partner violence, people living with HIV, struggling to come to terms with their HIV status, people struggling to come to terms with a cancer diagnosis. All sorts of problems were brought to the friendship bench. And the grandmas had this amazing ability of embracing this story, creating that space for people to share that story. And that's when I began to realize that truly the first thing that is important is to acknowledge that every human being has a story to tell. And unless we give them that space to tell their stories, that healing will not happen. And that human connection, which is critical for creating cohesive communities, will not happen either. And so that is why, really, at Friendship Bench, at the very core foundation of this work, although it is evidence-based and it's mental health, at the core, it's really about human stories and how they connect us.
Hey, all, I love this sponsor, Peak Nandaka. I know I'm not alone in falling into mid-morning slumps, and then I would drink caffeine as a fix to pick me up, but it would give me the jitters or I'd have the drops. And when I switched to Peaks Nandaka, it is amazing. It's made with functional mushrooms. However, it's a 20-time extract of medicinal mushrooms. So, unlike some of the other mushroom coffees out there on the market that use grains and fillers and mycelium, this is a potent mushroom extract, and it also has ceremonial grade cacao and other things that make it taste great as well as support your metabolism. It reduces my sugar cravings and hunger pains. But what I really love is that it keeps me focused and energized all day long. I seriously love the effect. When I run out, I actually find myself tracking the delivery because I love how productive I feel when I drink it. So it's packed with prebiotic and probiotics, so it makes the digestion smooth. And like I said, the 30% cacao butter helps it absorb. So if you try it, I really think you're going to love it. So you can get 20% off plus a free starter kit. You're going to get a cup and a frother with it with your order. And when you shop exclusively at peaklife.com/TU, that's PIQUE life.com TU, you'll get 20% off. Really proud of our new sponsor, Branch Basics. It's a women-owned company. They're from Texas. But what I'm really proud of is that they can make our home and our environment much safer. Have you ever wondered what toxic chemical cocktails you're spraying around your home every day? I was. And when I dove into it, it's really changed everything. Those conventional cleaners, including those all-purpose ones that we grew up with, are actually packed with chemicals linked to serious health problems, from respiratory problems, asthma, allergy, even hormone disruptions that can cause reproductive problems, developmental issues for children. You should check the research out on this. Branch Basic eliminates those toxins while it actually works. It's a truly human safe alternative. No dyes or fragrances. Fragrances are often harmful additives. It's really easy to use. It's one concentrated formula and it can replace every cleaner in your house. You just dilute it differently for every different purposes. And it's biodegradable, so no synthetic chemicals persisting in our waterways. Yay on that. I also love that they tackled packaging waste problems. You can reusable bottles in your starter kits. You can use either plastic or glass. And as someone passionate about health and our environment, I can genuinely say this company really aligns with it, what we love. So detox your home. Visit branchbasics.com to shop their premium starter kits and save 15% off with code TU at branchbasics.com. So it's 15% off your new Branch Basics premium starter kit at branchbasics.com. And remember, TU for 15% off. Your lungs and your hormones and your planet are all going to thank you.
So for one, you mentioned earlier supporting the grandmas. So it sounds like this is also a hub for referrals if needed, like helping people get to a higher level of care if they need it.
Yeah, it is inherently part of it because we do appreciate that the grandmas will not be able to fix every problem. For instance, if someone comes to the friendship bench and they are having a psychotic episode and they probably need a lot more than just talking to a grandma, they will be referred so they can get medication. If somebody comes to the friendship bench and yes, they are depressed, but they are also living with HIV, for instance, the grandma will then refer so that person can be started on antiretroviral medication. So every grandma, every trained person at Friendship Bench has a resource book. That booklet has all the different resources in that particular community. Where do you go if you are transgender? Where do you go if you are from the LGBTQ plus community and you need to connect with people who are like-minded? Where do you go if you are a survivor of intimate abuse, sexual abuse, all those things? So they have all of these resources, but at the same time, they make it possible for people to share their stories. One of the things that we also don't do at Friendship Bench when we are referring a person to a different care service is to say, go off and we don't want to see you again. I think the power of what the grandmothers do is in maintaining that connection, regardless of where they refer a person. And I think that makes a big difference in this work.
For sure, kind of that support. Is it like an actual bench? Is it actually outside? Is there an importance of that part of it? Because I'm imagining that it being outside just as a whole, it feels so, again, natural and non-shaming.
So definitely in a lot of places where we have introduced the Friendship Bench, the bench is always outside. When we introduced Friendship Bench in Kenya, in the tea estates, the friendship benches were actually in the actual tea estates, so that the tea pickers, and it's a very stressful job. They could have a session in the tea plantation. In New York City, and I was very skeptical when we started in New York City because it was one of our first replication. In New York City, the benches were actually on the pavement in the street, and in New York fashion, they had these benches which were bright orange, and I was skeptical. I thought no one's going to sit on a bright orange bench, but the first year 60,000 people sat on that bench to talk to one of the counselors or the therapists that were providing this service. But I must say the model in New York City was also very much about referring for other services, but they would create that link, that bond, by allowing people to share their stories and then refer them on to either see a psychiatrist or either see a doctor, depending on the nature of the problem that they were facing. And it worked very well. And so the bench can be anywhere.
I am so blown. When you say 60,000 people have sat on the bench in New York City, it just gives me goosebumps. But as a traditionally trained person, I keep thinking about the schedule. How do you schedule this? Is someone like sitting there at all time, just sitting and waiting for somebody to sit, or is there a schedule, or just what's the practical, like, how does that work?
So I guess it depends from place to place. So in Zimbabwe, where I guess we have our largest sort of presence, we have more than 3,000 grandmothers across the entire country. The grandmas usually have scheduled days and times that they are on the friendship bench. But the grandmas also live in the communities that they work. And a lot of them will also provide sessions outside of the physical bench. Because remember, for our grandmas, it's also about addressing the loneliness that older people tend to experience. And so for them, having that opportunity to speak to someone every day, it's a win-win, because then they are engaging with someone, they are helping someone, but at the same time, they have that sense of belonging and purpose because they're doing something that's making a difference to someone's life. And so the benches are in all sorts of places, and the scheduling again depends on where and who is running it. In Washington, D.C., for instance, it's at the wellness center. And so the scheduling is done through the wellness center. And I know that in Washington, D.C., the benches are also being planned for, libraries. And in New Orleans, you have the church, hair salons, all those kind of places that people will frequent. And then the booking is then done through those respective facilities.
Yeah, I was wanting to get kind of the practical a little bit more so that people can continue to envision, how do I bring this to my community and what does that look like? So yeah, let's just go right there. If I'm so excited. Like, I would love there to be a friendship bench in Austin, Texas, and I know people that are listening are like, we want this. Like, what would be the process or the steps?
So depends how you want to bring the bench. If you're an organization that wants to bring the bench to benefit thousands of people, the approach will be different. If you're an individual who wants to use the friendship bench techniques to help you and your family and your immediate smaller group, it might be easier to just go on our website. The website is www.friendshipbench.org. O-R-G. You click on the Join the Movement tab. When you click on that, it'll take you to the landing page. And on the landing page, it asks if you want to join the movement. You click on Join the Movement, and it'll ask you whether you're an individual, whether you are a for-profit, a non-profit, you are a research institute or other, and you click on whatever is appropriate and you fill in. It will take you less than 5 minutes to enter some very basic information. And we try to make this as simple as possible for anyone who wants to do it. So it's really literally at most 5 minutes. And we will receive all of that information at the back end. We have a team that filters. Well, we're using a lot of AI now to filter through things. And then we will immediately respond and offer you something. But also, if you are thinking of how best to actually implement at a very practical level Friendship Bench, my book, The Friendship Bench, How 14 Grandmothers Inspired a Mental Health Revolution, will actually be very helpful as a starting point. But you can also get a lot of information on our website about Friendship Bench. We can share a lot of resource material for free. We have a lot of publications which have been, as I said, we have over 100 peer-reviewed scientific publications, which we can make available. Some of them are very sort of scientific in the way they are written, but we can help to simplify them if someone wants to better understand. So I would say if anyone wants to do a Friendship Bench, visit our website and just fill in that form and we will get back to you.
And as a reminder, any senior listening, or if you work with seniors, that you've offered the level 1 training for free potentially. What's the level 2 and the level 3, just to get the whole?
Yeah, just briefly. So the level 2 is essentially now equipping you with the skills to use some of the screening tools that we use to help you identify who is a red flag, like who is suicidal. Where do you refer them? What do you do? How do you establish that somebody's suicidal? How do you establish that someone is psychotic? But we use screening tools which are validated in many countries. So in the USA, for instance, we work a lot with the PHQ-9, the G87, and in places where there's been a lot of conflict, we will use, for instance, the PCL5, which is a screening tool for PTSD. So we teach you how to use those tools, but we also equip you with how to integrate those tools in the storytelling as you embrace somebody's story. We also equip you with the skill of how to use the summary or reflection of what the story is. How do you reflect around a story, and how do you use that reflection to identify what needs to be zeroed in on in terms of assisting that person who is there? It's not really equipping them with the skills to go out there and solve their problems. And then the third component touches on some of the more technical aspects, such as behavior activation, activity scheduling, problem solving, how to create support groups, because we have thriving support groups in the different communities where we have Friendship Bench. And it also touches on self-care. Self-care is an important piece of everything that we do.
That makes me think about, related to self-care, I'm imagining these kind stalwarts in the community. I mean, who wouldn't want this resource? You know what I mean? So I imagine part of the training is some sort of related to self-care, some sort of boundary setting, so that they don't burn out, or so that they don't actually adopt the person that they love, or the client that they enjoy. Is that part of the self-care that you teach?
It is part of the self-care. One important component of the self-care is also regular debrief sessions, and also making it possible for anyone who is facing a difficult case to reach out to a supervisor. So all the grandmothers have supervisors. And so the way it works is grandmas who've been with Friendship Bench for more than 5 years, for instance, will oversee and supervise grandmas who are just starting. And those grandmas who've been around for a long time will then be supervised by a clinical psychologist or a psychiatrist. So it's really a stepped care model type of approach where everyone is supporting everybody. And part of the self-care also involves focusing on some of the things that, most people are already familiar with that need to be emphasized, exercising, diet. You are what you eat, and so we often encourage within the support groups and the self-care support oriented programs for people to focus more on the traditional foods, which consisted very much of whole grains, a lot of green stuff, a lot of indigenous sort of fruits and berries. In fact, what we often will say is, think about what your ancestors used to eat, and that often is a sort of starting point. And, with that, people then come up with a list of, the ideal food stuff. You also then get people actually working together on how they can grow some of these more indigenous vegetables and plants. And so it's really a very active sort of self-care approach to both the groups in terms of clients and also the grandmas.
Well, and it's so deeply interwoven into community. I love you mentioning sort of pulling in ancestors and history, and that it's sustainable with these community groups that they move into. I'm so excited by this, and it just feels like a brilliant. I love that you say Friendship Bench in a box. Like, you have it figured out. You've done the research. This is something in a way, probably that has been, how we have survived over eons is exactly, it's reminding us of these things.
It is, and I remember one of the grandmas, Grandma Jack, when I first started, and I was like, you have to be careful because, I don't want you to go out there and say the wrong thing because a client may take their own life because you say the wrong thing. And so just remember that you're not professionals. And she kept reminding me, that way before professionals came along, our ancestors had ways of resolving community conflict and reaching out to those that were in need. All we're doing here is leaning into that knowledge.
You mentioned AI. Is video care any part of this? Is there, for accessibility or anything like that?
We do have a video component, but it's not used that much. It's used a lot in the Netherlands. The Netherlands is one of the countries that has picked up Friendship Bench in a big way through the Friendship Bench app called Inuka, Inuka. Inuka literally stands for arise. It's a Swahili word. So yes, there's a lot of video calling that is done. And the reason why it's not used much in Zimbabwe and a lot of countries in the South is because it costs a lot of money to have video sessions. A lot of people don't have that kind of data on their phones or even Wi-Fi, in which we tend to take for granted in the Northern Hemisphere. In some parts of the world, it's still a luxury. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why it hasn't picked up that much, but it is available as an option. I mean, we do a lot of our trainings online now, as Friendship Bench. And I think we are increasingly moving more and more towards using that platform. Having said that, the vast majority who use Friendship Bench always say they would rather do the face-to-face or not. And just to put that into context, last year, over 200,000 people sat on a Friendship Bench to get therapy. And last year, only about 10,000 received virtual or video Friendship Bench. So there's still a lot more desire for the face-to-face connection than the virtual connection. Maybe with time it'll change.
Well, I hope not. Certainly, with COVID, when everything moved online, and then now post-pandemic, so many therapists have stayed online, which is fine. But I'm a group therapist, and I can tell you when my group got back together, they are absolutely, they're like, we will never go back online again. It's just not even close to the same thing.
Well, that's good to hear. It's not just an African thing. It's a global thing. Yeah.
No, but it's also very easy to justify why the video is good when it also serves you, right? Like that you don't have to have an office and things like that. It's like, oh, but video works when it does, and it absolutely does. But I'm definitely an advocate for visual face, sharing molecules, smelling each other, Just as a wrap up question that I was hoping to just hear, based on your experience and your research and your perspective, like your vision of mental health initiatives going forward, and kind of where that you might see this going, or just kind of what's in your future, and then what's in the program's future that you might hope for.
My hope is we make it possible for communities across the world to provide mental health services for each other. We need to equip ordinary folks in communities so they can do extraordinary things. Just that realization that you don't need to be a therapist or a psychiatrist. And I think to do that, part of the solution is to not emphasize the medicalization of folks presenting with mental health issues. And I think this is probably one of the biggest lessons that I picked up from the grandmothers, not to obsess with the diagnosis, not to obsess with making people fit into the DSM-5 categories or ICD-10 categories, but to really appreciate that regardless of what a person is going through, they have a story to tell, and making that the priority and the entry point. So there will always be room for diagnosis, but it should never be the entry point. The entry point is a story, because human beings connect through stories. That's one of the things I've learned from the grandmas, and that's what I would hope for if people are going to do friendship bench or do anything similar out there. Leaning to the stories first and foremost.
That's beautiful. And that makes me think, are there other initiatives like the Friendship Bench that are also happening?
Oh yeah, I'm sure there are. There's a lot of stuff going on in India, for instance, through the Sangat, Institute, which was founded by Vikram Patel. There is Shamiri in Kenya. There's Strong Minds in Uganda. So there are a couple of initiatives which are delivered by non-professionals, which are running and have really picked up in terms of traction.
Well, that's incredible. And if there's anything in the world that we could do to support this, we really want to. Those of you that are interested, that are listening, this is the book that he's been talking about, The Friendship Bench. There's also another episode we had mentioned. It's episode 127, where that we spoke with you all several years ago, where you can learn more and hear even a different perspective from Ruth. And particularly this book, it gives a lot more detail about the stories. So some of the most delightful parts, I think, of even this conversation is hearing from the grandmas and learning from them. And so if you're interested in that kind of thing, this book is going to be your best starting place to inspire you related to these techniques and everything that they have learned. And so I highly recommend it. Now I have an uncorrected advance copy. Is it released yet? That's right. On the back of it, it says available April 2025. So this is so beautiful. I'm just going to read a couple of the from the contents. Chapter 2, all of us are vulnerable. The first step, opening the mind, pineapples and voodoo, resistance, songs of healing, songs of grief, and so on. And of course, you have a chapter about Erica, which is beautiful. So that gives you a little bit of a taste of it. It's an enjoyable, inspiring read. And is there any other thoughts that we haven't said yet or that you want to repeat for those listening to be inspired in their own communities or even in their own families?
Regardless of whether you choose to read the Friendship Bench or follow the Friendship Bench, I just want to remind listeners out there, each one of us has the ability to heal. Each one of us has the ability to contribute and create that space for healing within our communities. We have it within ourselves, and we should just really zero in on that which we intuitively all have. And all we're doing at Friendship Bench really is making people realize the power that is within them as human beings and how they can contribute to collective community healing.
This could not be a more important conversation. It certainly dovetails into some of our work. We have a book, Secure Relating, Holding Your Own in an Insecure World. And the gist of it has to do with how to find that, what we call the green zone, which is that exactly that, your level 1 training. It's how to hold space. It makes you safer. And by making yourself safer, it makes the person with you safer. And then it's these little ripples of security that happen. And this is an actual implementation of that idea. That's not where it came from, of course. But so, we're getting at it from 2 different directions, but it's landing us as it has, like you said, throughout history with human beings learning how to, relearning the natural state of just being and being present and being with one another ultimately. It's beautiful. If people are interested in talking with you or finding out more, can you repeat some of the socials and anything about reaching you?
Sure. So www.friendshipbench.org. You can see all my other links through that link, including my personal link, Dixon.Chibanda.org. It's all linked through that, and my speaking engagements. And also, as I said, we are offering this free online training for people who are 65 and above, because we feel they are a resource that we need to recognize across the globe. And that's really why we are offering these trainings for free.
I just don't know how to amplify this message enough, but we will do our best to amplify this incredible, hopeful love story, really. And I cannot, again, thank you enough for your work and your dedication and what you've done for the world, really, and for sitting with me and having this conversation. Thank you very much for coming.
I'm honored. Thank you very much for having me, Sue. Thank you.
Okay. If you have found this kind of content valuable, we encourage you to follow us, especially on Spotify, where we lost all of our followers due to a glitch. But to follow us, leave us a rating and review, and to please share this episode with someone that may also be inspired by it. Okay. Well, thanks for listening, and we'll see you around the bend.
Therapist Uncensored is Ann Kelly and Sue Marriott. This podcast is edited by Jack Anderson.